you think?
Uh, so basically, when you talk about exclusion in that type of respect, one of the main things when you start excluding big groups of people or cultures or religions, ethnicities, that sort of stuff, and specifically Black people, you think about the exclusion economically, politically, and socially.
Mm-hmm.
So exclusion economically hinders where you can work. Puts a salary cap on you. It
Mm-hmm.
excludes things like redlining, which excludes your ability to purchase land or property, which then could be leveraged to start businesses or to go to college or to grow your wealth base.
Mm-hmm.
Exclusion politically, like voter registration type suppression,
Mm-hmm.
where you can't go and get your voice heard and you can't contribute that way. And then the social dynamic of you're not allowed over here, like
Mm-hmm.
sundown cities, sundown
Exactly.
towns,
Sundown towns. Yeah.
where look, you can come over here and work for me till 5, but you better be out of here before 6:15 when the sun go down.
Mm-hmm.
None of those things that benefit. You can't even go to the place you work at on your day off. Like you can't, so you
Yeah.
start thinking about exclusion that way. And so there's a lot of components that have affected
Mm-hmm.
us in those departments, economically, politically,
Mm-hmm.
socially, for
Yeah.
up until recent history. So,
Definitely. So just thinking about real quick, like our exclusion socially, what do you think some of the remnants of that is? Because me and you've talked about how just looking at the scope of racism and how we've been treated in America, looking at where we stand today, you can't put that 100% on racism. You have to go into accountability and what we've been able to learn and process. But just looking at the social component, how does that affect somebody? Like if I'm trying to be the best human I can and work and strive to be whatever, but there's a store I can't go into, the school I'm in, no one looks like me. In your opinion, like how does this affect our psyche as just humans?
So depending upon what you're made of. So for some people, it creates an incredible chip on your shoulder. Like you just always like, man, these folks is always messing with me. These folks think they better than me. These folks is like, and you kind of walk around with that, that chip on your shoulder. Other people, it inspires them. It's like, all right, you don't want me in your store, I'll build my own store. You don't want me in your town, I'll build my own town. Some people, they internalize it and they can lead to insecurity and depression and lack of self-confidence. Like, why am I not good enough to be here? How come you don't want me over here? How come, what I mean? There's a lot of different directions you can go with it.
And I feel like, and I know that we'll talk a little bit later before we wrap it up about this topic in particular. We'll talk about how we've been able to make like lemonade from lemons. Like we've been able to do a good job, some of us, at saying, you know what, you don't want me involved, I'm gonna go make my own. I'm gonna go Black Wall Street it. There was a time where we couldn't be involved in anything. So all we had to do mentally was say, you know what, my only option is to build with my brother or sister who's right next to me. But sometimes I'm like those of us who've been harshly affected by being excluded. I like to talk about that, because if you couldn't go to a school, or if your family was excluded from a certain neighborhood, and then you have to grow up with the same mentality they had, so they may have created some negative habits based on their exclusion. So how do you think that like affects our families and how we're trying to raise our families when we have a history of not being so invited in things, and it may have affected us negatively? You know what I mean?
So it's an extension of, you can create animosity in children because you keep telling them how cold the world is and how these people won't let us over here. And the child has never had the firsthand experience yet, but it's been ingrained in them that these people don't like us. So before they do something to me, I'm going to form my opinion about them. And so we can pass down that to our kids the same way we can pass down fear, like as a form of a defense mechanism for safety. Man, don't be over there with them people. Don't be on that side of town. You ain't got no business over there. And create a fear in our children of, oh, I shouldn't. I'm not gonna. I don't want to go against the grain. I don't want to. And we create you know, an oppressive boogeyman in
Mm-hmm.
our babies that they then now kind of shrink down in fear of what could be, even once again, even though they never had the firsthand experience yet, but it's been ingrained in them. The same way it can fortify babies. It's like, look, this is why it's so important for you to be able to take care of yourself. This is why it's so necessary for you to be able to build with your brothers and sisters. This is why, and drill that into them. So how does it affect? It's still an extension of those things we were talking about earlier. Now, which one shows itself? That's kind of case by case.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's case by case, but just like as a template, when I'm listening to you say that, as parents and older people, so let's say we've had a history of not being included in things, how you present that ideal to your kids, how you present how to move forward to your kids matters a lot, because I was reading an article about PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder, and how racism affects our bodies at times. Subtle things you may be going through. It seems like, Jermaine, I just be wanting, that's why I talk a lot about history. I just want our people to have an understanding of what happened so you can understand it a little more. So maybe you don't internalize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the basis of evolution and the continuation of a species. So your body incorporates the things to be fearful of so you can continue to live. Like pick up certain sounds, recognize certain smells, to be able to identify certain environmental things. That's where like that root, like where those phobias and stuff come, is to keep you safe. So when you talk about dealing with constant oppression and PTSD and all that, it does get ingrained in the system because your system is looking out for you. So it gets ingrained in the system, and you'll hear generational trauma and things that get passed down because, okay, this thing happens in your lifetime. So this is something really to be afraid of. So we need to incorporate this into the DNA for the next generation because they need to be fearful of it too. Like they need to be aware of this too. This is a real fear that affects your ability to continue to exist. So generations of trauma, of abuse, all that starts to work its way into the body. So the body's ability to start to identify, to pick up on, to